All right, we're here with Todd Radom, author, designer, entrepreneur extraordinaire. Todd, we were just talking before this about what it takes to go out and do things on your own and just, do exactly what you want to do. What what do you think was required of you to do that yourself? And then what can people take away from that?
Well, first of all, Buster, I'm so happy to be here with you. I appreciate you reaching out, and this is going to be a great conversation. So, my whole story revolves around the fact that I am a fourth generation artist, right? And so, if you're an artist, you've got to reach deep within yourself, and it takes a certain kind of something to make it happen and to have a successful actual career aside from just doing it. So I always say like my role models were all around me. And when I went off on my own, after having graduated college, I worked two full-time jobs. I was, let's do the math. I was 26 years old, and I am now, unbelievably to me, 60 years old. And I've been doing it by myself ever since. So I kind of knew that I would be in an entrepreneurial position at a certain point, I think pretty early on. And I took it seriously, aside from just, doing good work and curating my own brand and, being me and doing what I do. All of the things that go along with being an entrepreneur, I was interested in early on. And it's helped me throughout. And here I am all these years later.
That's amazing. I love that. So I was looking through your Instagram, and one of the reasons why I reached out is some of the logos you've done are just iconic, not just to my sports fandom, but so many other people. Obviously, the big one right now, the Indiana WNBA logo that is now going to be seen by probably half the world, if I
Yeah.
had to guess this year. I mean, it's going to be the biggest story. There's going to be a point in the next couple weeks where a WNBA game gets more views than an NBA playoff game, and that is going to be huge.
Yeah.
It's going to be nuts. And that's obviously one of your logos. Another couple that I love are the 2008 Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan, grew up in New York. I remember that. I remember the '09. I remember when they won the first. That was the first year I was a sports fan. Uh, the 60th anniversary Kobe, the Lakers one. Love that. How did you sort of get your foot in the door and, you know, put yourself in a position to be doing these iconic sports logos?
In retrospect, it's actually a pretty great story, I think at least, because it involves a combination of luck, persistence, being born in the right place, and being around at the right time. So I'll move it back and say, when I was a kid, and I grew up in the New York area like you did, I was a sports fan, but coming from a creative family, I looked at this stuff from a little bit of a different perspective, right? I was never necessarily a great athlete, but if I went to a game at Yankee Stadium with my dad and I looked on the field, I'd look at uniforms, right? And this information wasn't as available as it is now. Clearly, a world way before an internet existed, a world where we only had like five TV stations, right? And I think that having grown up in the 1970s was really instrumental to having an interest in this stuff because in the 1970s you've got alternate leagues, the ABA, right, the World Football League, the World Hockey Association coming online. You've got expansion teams, you've got teams moving, and you've got a crazy era in terms of what the uniforms were starting to look like. And this was all, as I found out later, but it makes sense, geared toward the TV age, which was still for sports a relatively new thing and sort of modern marketing. So anyway, always had an interest in this stuff, had an interest in this stuff while I was in college at School of Visual Arts in New York. And in the late 1980s, early 1990s, some of the stuff I'm doing is streetwear, right? Apparel design. At this moment, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and the National Hockey League are opening up their first in-house creative services departments, because there's this thing happening. Again, here too, expansion teams, this appeal to youth when it comes to selling stuff. Again, it's a little bit before the internet, but you think about the fact that the Charlotte Hornets come out of the gate in what, 1987, 88, with uniforms designed by a fashion designer, Alexander Julian. You think about the fact that in 1990, the Chicago White Sox, they changed their look up, and it is immediately embraced by the hip hop community. Dr. Dre is out there wearing a White Sox cap. You can go on and on and on. So it's this moment where popular culture, fast fashion, and sports are colliding, and there's a need for more and more graphics. I found out that MLB was opening up a creative services department. Again, being young and entrepreneurial, I'm reading Business Week magazine. I remember exactly where it was. And back in those days, we had portfolios, and they were literally a box, like with printed samples of your work. And you would drop your work off at a place. I'm just going to paraphrase and say, at an ad agency, they'd say, drop off Wednesdays, Fridays, sometime before 10 a.m., pick up after 4:30 p.m. You'd usually find a note in there which said, thank you for your interest. If there's an opportunity to work together, we'll call you. I dropped my portfolio off at Major League Baseball in early 1991, and the note that came back said, give us a call. We think we could do some business together. The woman who wrote that note was a woman named Ann Ossie, OCCI. She was the first creative director for Major League Baseball. I met with her. She just retired in 2020. So the relationship with MLB, I owe a lot to her. And that moved me on to the NBA and the NFL and so on down the line. And here I am today still. But the last piece of this conversation, Buster, is the fact that I always say that if we had a sports designer convention at that time, it would be 5 guys, right? And they'd all look like me. They're like 5 white guys of a certain age. So it's really quite different now all these years later.
Sure. So you think the thing that got you in the door with all of those other leagues was just dropping it off, having a great portfolio, and then crushing it for them, which then opened the doors for all the other leagues after that?
Well, a couple of things in my portfolio, and again, it kind of like makes me chuckle because it's like I said, this heavy box, right?
Yeah,
I had done a lot of sports related stuff. I was hustling at a very early age doing freelance work. I think my first design job that I ever got paid for, I was something like 15. So after I graduate college, and again, this is shortly before computerization, I'm working with ad agencies, book publishers, licensed, licensed stuff in New York, dropping my portfolio off, making a living, and I was doing really, really well. I specialized in hand lettering back then, which literally was by hand. And
sure.
it was this very tactile experience. It was a very valued skill. And I mean, I was killing it. I was making a lot of money and I was working a lot of hours and I was loving it. I was like taking big bites out of all of it and enjoying it. And anyway, I had some sports stuff in the portfolio. Baseball certainly got it, but in terms of like parlaying that into work with other leagues, I think it was like doing a good job, being responsible, meeting deadlines on time. Listen, like doing a good job is a very subjective thing. Design's a very subjective thing. But again, meeting those deadlines, navigating the process, particularly as a younger creative, I think I got equity and I made a name by kind of being, humbly good and dependable.
Amazing. And now when you think about, like, obviously the world is very different. People aren't carrying around their portfolios, although in a sense they are when you look at someone's online, brand, you
That's
can
right.
see everything they've ever done. That's probably the closest thing. What would you suggest to a young creative who is in the position where they have stuff that they've done? That's obviously what the first step would be, is just try things and make things and put it out there. But to build those first bridges of relationships in the places that they want to associate with.
Yeah, Buster.